In today's video, I hope to cover an introduction to the Dynabot functionality introduced in Freeform. So a couple versions ago, we opened up this ability to create what we call Dynabots inside of Freeform. And really the functionality is targeted towards automating the process of using this software. So the Dynabot is really kind of like an advanced macro type scripting engine that plugs directly into Freeform. And primarily, the way I create the Dynabots is by recording and playing back the processes. And then you do have the ability to add different sorts of loops and things like that into the process. Um, but that is the primary mode for creation for the average user like me. So today is an attempt at creating, and I emphasize attempt at creating a approachable Dynabot introduction for the average user. So this is a new piece of functionality that even we internally are coming up to speed on. So I'm going to have some mistakes along the way, but my goal is to give you some of the essential skills that it takes to create very basic Dynabots and get you up and running. So the first thing, as you can see, I have this Dynabot window open here on the left-hand side. The first thing you need to do is you scroll all the way down to the bottom, and you'll see that we have the Dynabot area. I went ahead and if you just drag this out into the graphics window, you can pull the Dynabot palette out. And if you're going to be using it a lot, that's helpful. I also pulled the Dynabot icon here, the repository, and I went and put it in my favorites palette. There's an awful lot of under this. When you hit this, you'll notice that this is a whole folder structure where all your default Dynabot files are located. So to show you where the Dynabots reside, they are in the install directory. So if I just pull up my File Explorer, you can see that it's C, Program Files, 3D Systems, the version of Freeform that you have, Dynabot examples, and inside of these you can see that you have these XML files, which that's really all they are, is just using the XML functionality to extend the software. So that is where they are. So when you create them, they'll be in that folder, and you can even create more folders within that structure. So you can see I can create a new window. I can come in and you'll see that my homemade ones are there, and then we even have some examples baked into the software. Now, in order to open that window, you'll see here that you can just click New Window and it'll create a new window. Now, inside of this window, obviously you have the ability to uh, get to that same icon. You have your Dynabot settings. So there's some more in there, palette settings, recording options, what it records when you create a Dynabot. And some of these things I'll touch on along the way. And then, of course, you have the ability to save, capture screenshots, and record like we're going to do today. So the first thing that we're going to do here is just create and just start by building something very, very basic and then build on top of it and add to it. So the way recording works is all I have to do is just hit record and it'll record everything that I do in this graphics window, and you'll see it line by line appear over here on the left hand side. So just to give you an idea, I want to go ahead and automate or script the ability to open a specific file when I start building my model. So today we're going to go through a popular O&P, orthopedic and prosthetics workflow, where we just create a basic brace from a model. And I want to even script the ability to open it or import it from a certain location. So what I'm going to do is just hit record. Now we are live, and I can go ahead and hit import model. And by default, the software has the most recent location where it imported the model from. You can even control where it imports this from, and you can even reset the import location if you need to inside of scripts. That functionality is there, but for today, what we're going to do is just hit import, and then what I'm going to do is just hit F2 for front view, and you'll see that it records that. And then I can hit fit to view as well, the F key, and it'll do a fit to view. Now, if I hit the rotate keys, the up and down and left and right arrows, you can see I can rotate the model. And you see that it even records that, which you can turn that off if you want to. So that is all I'm going to do to start out. It's just record importing the model, going to a front viewport, do a fit to view just in case, and then rotating with the arrow keys. So now if I run this step over again, we'll just go into a file new, say no, start with an empty piece. And then if I go up here and hit play, it'll just come in and do those same exact steps that we just talked about. Now, you'll see that I had to do a file new and then run it. What if I want to add that part? So what I can do is I like to break up my code into sections of functionality first. So what I can do first is just group that and just call this import, right? And then let's record creating a new file and put that in front of the import. Now, this is another piece of functionality that I like about the Dynabot functionality is the ability to open a new window. So we'll just drag this down, and it'll just be kind of like my scratch pad where I can record pieces of code and then drop them in here. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to hit record, and I'm going to go file, new, don't save changes, start with empty model. And then I'll just tell it to switch to select mode. That's kind of like getting out of every command, and then hit stop. So this code right here, I can select that code and just group it together and call this file new, copy it. And when I click on an area, it'll put it after whatever I click on. So I believe the only way to do this here is to click on it. It'll put file new behind that, and I can drag it in front. So it'll do a file new. So it'll create a new model with these settings, and then it will switch to the selection tool. Then it will go to import model and rotate it around. So now, if I go to run that, I'll just hit play. Goes file new, rotates it around, file import, boom. Now, if I didn't want it to import the same exact model every time, you'll see here that under import, it's going to locate to a very specific area. If I just go remove that, now when I go ahead and run it, it'll do a file new, no save changes. It'll prompt me to select the file. Now, if I go ahead and select that file, hit import, it'll go ahead and bring it in and rotate it around. So we covered some very basic editing and grouping and dragging stuff around. So now let's go ahead, and you'll notice that it has the arm clay 1 highlighted over in the tree. Selecting and deselecting things over in the tree and activating and deactivating them is very important to the scripting process. So you can guide the user through what it should select, what that person should select and deselect and do the commands on. So what I'm going to tell it to do right now is come in and tell it to memorize recall selection. So you'll see here, I'm just going to tell it to remember arm clay 1. And you'll see here, use the same command to memorize as you do to recall. So all we're going to do is just tell it to remember that object for later. That's all we're going to do. Now, let's go ahead and build the steps where we're going to create the brace and record it. So I'll go ahead and hit save here, and we'll go ahead and save our Dynabots in here. I'm going to call this brace 2 and save that Dynabot. So now, picking up right where I left off, like I can leave the model in this state right where it left off the script. I can go ahead and get rid of what I have here in kind of like my scratchpad Dynabot. Let's go ahead and record some of the steps now. So we'll go ahead and hit record. And we'll go ahead, just in case, I'll hit fit to view again. I always add those in there because I want it to fit to view. And then I'll go ahead and hit create plane. Then after I hit create plane, we'll go ahead and we'll sketch on that plane. Now, what I'm about to do takes user interaction. So this part of drawing of the sketch will be recorded, but it'll prompt the user. It'll prompt the user to actually draw this, and you'll see that here in a second. So I'll go ahead and draw that curve, and then I'll get out of the sketch command, and then we will come over to a newer tool to Freeform called Shell Cut Clay. It's essentially a tool that pretty much creates half of the brace for you by taking the sketch, intersecting it. It offsets the entire model, extrudes this shape, Boolean intersects them together, and then subtracts the original anatomy through it. A lot there, but really what it does, you'll see here in a second. You select the sketch that you want to use, you hit next, you select the thickness and the offset values, which I'm going to use 4 millimeters for each. I'm going to tell it to create the piece in a new object with the resolution of 0.3, and then I'm going to hit apply. So it'll take it a second to run because my computer is not the fastest in the world. But what it's going to do again is essentially create an offset brace object here on the tree. So there we go. It created the brace on the tree. And we'll just go over here. And let's go ahead and get out of the command by going back to select and then break up this piece of code into its own section. So you're going to fit to view, create the plane, sketch on the plane, and then because the interaction that I did was such a manual interaction, Freeform automatically, when you go into sketch, pauses, gives you instructions to sketch, and then will allow you to hit play, and then it'll keep playing. So it does that for you automatically, and you can add pauses anywhere you want to in this workflow. So at the end of this, you'll notice that shell cut is now selected. So what I'm going to do at the end of this script, before we even copy and paste it, is I'm going to tell it to go ahead and memorize. Selection 2 is going to be shell cut. And then I'll go ahead and it's good to have just good organizational skills when you do this. We will call this shell cut brace, and then I'll go ahead and copy that directly after the memorize and then paste it. So now it'll go ahead and go into fit to view, create plane, all the way through and memorize selection number 2. So because we did file new, I did that on purpose because I don't have to do anything here, and I want to run this script again. I can just hit play. It asks me to save changes. I say no. It'll ask me for the start model. As soon as it does that, you see it walks through all the same steps. It memorizes that selection, creates a plane, takes me right into the sketch, and allows me to go ahead and draw that shape again. And you'll see that it gives me instructions: draw, sketch on, curve. And then when I'm done, I hit the play button. It goes and does the same exact shell cut with the same parameters. So you see here that it went ahead and finished out the brace, and then it just stopped right there. So the next step is, remember when I told you let's go ahead and memorize selection 1. Now we'll come in and say let's memorize recall selection 1. Instead of memorize, we will change it to recall. So it's going to remember that selection, but it doesn't do anything yet until you tell it to activate it. So if you've used Freeform before, you know that it needs to activate an object, right? And then you can go ahead here, you can say activate the selected object. So you have to activate an object for you to do anything with it, right? So this is activated right now. And the reason why is what we're going to do is if you rotate this around, this is impossible to really put your hand inside. So we're going to create the ability to create ridges between the fingers and cut this up into 2 pieces. And then when we're done, we'll just make a script that says let's export that as a mesh. Right? So those are the steps that we're going to take here. Now, in order to do that, we want to draw the curves on the other objects. So we need to activate that first object. And then once we activate that first object, we're then going to draw the curves. So we'll go ahead and go back to our scratch pad here. And we will hit record. And because we created that with the front plane, we could just turn this off. You'll see hide object, and it will automatically remember to hide the front plane object from here on out. And then we already have in our code that this is going to be active, but I'm going to activate it right now and you'll see here activate object. We'll just delete that out later. And then we'll go ahead and hide the shell cut. And then we'll come over here to draw curve. And with draw curve, every setting you touch in the Dynabot, it will add a setting change to the defaults of the software. So you see that? So if you're very specific about what you want to happen, you need to touch every option in the Dynabar for it to change from its default to something else for the script. So now that we have that, we will come in and you'll see I have it set to record my viewpoints right now. And remember to overdraw your curves. But I will go ahead and delete those grab view changes later. I don't need those for my. There we go. I mean, you could, if the anatomy was very similar every time, you could keep some of those view changes to get you into a similar orientation to draw the pieces that you need. But most likely, if you're repeating these steps over and over again on individuals' anatomy, it's going to be very different every time. And there's no point in recording all these view changes. So there, we drew all of those curves. And then when we're done, I like to toggle back to the select key. Now what we're going to do is we're going to use the ridge tool. And with the ridge, we're going to toggle it to square. So you see, it was already set to square, but I'm going to change it to square just for the sake of changing it and making sure that the setting is set right. And then apply a new piece, create a new piece there. And then under my settings, we'll go ahead and make it 8 millimeters thick by 1 millimeter. Just retype it in again. That way it gets those changes as we talked about. And then we will select the pieces that we want to work with and then hit apply. So that'll take it a second for it to calculate. And then we will close this portion of the script out and group it. So again, we'll go ahead and get out of the command by going back to select. And then we'll stop recording, memorize selection 3. So it's going to memorize its selection. Now, as we talked about before, we'll go ahead and get rid of all the grabs. So you'll see here that it goes hide object, select, activate, draw curve. It'll just go into it, change the setting. Now, what we need to do is insert a pause. So this is a time where it did not automatically insert a pause. So we can come in, and you can do a couple things. I can copy and paste my pause, or I can just find it here in the tree. And then also, right before the pause, I can come in and I can add instructions. So I'll make an instruction, come into edit, draw curves to cut the brace. So and then it will pause, and then once I hit play, it will actually apply and create the ridge from that, and then create a new piece. I hit that twice, so I'll go ahead and delete it because I turned it off and on again. So we'll get rid of that. So now I'll grab all of this and then call it my ridge operation, copy, and then paste it. So now I have my ridge operation. And then we'll go ahead and save my Dynabot for now, and then we will start the process over again. So I hit this, and it walks us through the steps all over again. So now you see, it went ahead and activated the first object, went inside of draw curves, and fitting is not on for some reason, but I will go ahead and turn that on. And now I will draw the curves. You notice that I overdraw just to make sure that I have the proper locations to cut all the way through. And then it'll prompt me to select the curves. So I'll go ahead and select those curves. Guess I have to select them in the graphics window. And then it finished. So it looks like I have to click on all three of them at once. So you'll notice there that there was one little mistake here that I need to do. So before it goes ahead and creates these, I need to select, after I draw my curves, I need to pause before select profile. So right here, you can see that I have to select the profiles. I need to come all the way down, create a new piece, create ridge. I need to put a pause in here because I need to give myself the ability to select all of them before. So I'll put a pause in there. That'll give me the chance to select all of those before it finishes the command. So if I just hit undo, this is a way to show how you can kind of troubleshoot your code. I can just start right here. I can just click on ridge and hit play from selection. Draw curves on brace, and then when you're done, I already drew them, hit play. Now we can come in and select the curves. And you see, because it paused, and I can even put an instruction file next to before the pause that says select curves, right? And then I could even add just a select all curves because there's only 3 curves in here and they all belong to this. You could do something along that line. And then we'll go ahead and hit end new piece and then hit play. Now that it's finished, I can say, let's go ahead and record. Delete that. And we will record creating a Boolean, remove from arm clay. Actually, shell cut is what we want to remove it from. And then once that's finished, turn on shell cut. And you will see that we then Boolean that. And then we can say activate shell cut. And then export shell cut as selected piece. We'll just go to the desktop, save. So that completes the process. If I wanted to, I could then actually record this as well. File save as desktop, file new. And then hit stop. So in this instance, what I might do is come over here and break this up and group it as an export, keeping everything nice and clean. Grab both of these, copy, and paste those at the end and hit save. And then this is where we'll go ahead and get rid of these. You can go ahead and test your code. Oops. I didn't mean to put these inside of that other one, so we'll go ahead and select these, cut, paste. So we'll do ridge, boolean, export. Now I do think that there's a couple little problems with this, which I'll walk through and fast forward. I'll go ahead and run this script and speed it up for the video's sake. And then I will figure out, there was a couple little things here that I might want to add to the ridge, such as create a new piece, something along those lines, but we will see. I'll just go ahead and run this as a test. So there we go, it finished it out. There's the ridge, there's the shell cut. And if I go to import from my desktop, you'll see that it created an STL. I'll go ahead and bring it in. You'll see here, I'll just change it to mesh. So it did save that out as a mesh on the desktop. So that is what I wanted to show today. The only other thing that I was looking to show here is when it goes into ridge, and you see how it has create a new piece, create ridge. I might just hit this create a new piece. I think what happened there is create a new piece off. I need to turn it on. And so you see there, what I did is I turned that button on or off and I deleted the wrong one. So now it'll make it create in a new piece. And the only other thing that I would do in here is, I would put an instruction that it's exporting now. Put an instruction that it's booleaning the two pieces together now, right? And just kind of clean it up a little more, just to give it more interaction so you understand what's happening when it happens. And then you could always put right at the end an instruction that says done. That way it'll pop up in this window and let you know that it's done. Or you could just loop it. You could have this loop back around and tell it to start the script all over again. If this is something you're going to do over and over again all day, importing these models, then you could just loop it back to the beginning. So this is my introductory Dynabot workflow. Hopefully that is helpful because it gives you the ability to know how to record things, group things, memorize selections, pause, play, give instructions, and then troubleshoot a little bit of the code. So I kind of covered some of the very basics of creating a Dynabot. Hopefully this will help everyone out there. And thanks a lot for your time.